There are so many of us that are going through the experience of our mind saying yes, but our body and our nervous system viscerally saying no. How does that happen? How do we get into this cycle where we can talk ourselves into things that physiologically do not feel aligned for us?
If you're constantly feeling below everyone else, belittled, disrespected, like you are disconnected from your body, even, you need to learn the 4 types of consent because it's likely, highly likely, that you have not been taught the 4 different types of consent and why they're so important. And as a result, you've been unknowingly and unconsciously giving away your power, which is leading you to feel this belittled, disrespected, and disconnected from even your own body. Don't let this be you. Let's learn together.
Hey everybody, what is going on? It's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. This episode, I am excited to deliver. And also, if I'm being real, which I always am, but just being explicit on that, this is a topic that is so hairy and so multi-layered and so multifaceted that it's really easy to get turned off in this. So stick with us here, and trust me, by the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with the 4 different types of consent, why that's important to know in your life, and how to get better at knowing when you're in a moment that is of consent, and what to do when someone is thinking that you gave consent when in reality you didn't. So
Before you dive in, stay tuned till the very, very end. We have a special surprise and a special announcement that is only for the people who are listening to this episode. So stay till the end so you can make sure to hear what that is.
Thanks, B. Yeah, good stuff coming up, and we're super excited about it. So consent. Let's start with a shared definition, B, because you and I know that when we start there, no one's excluded. And that's so important in this conversation. I'm going to start by saying consent, the definition that I have, B, and then if you want to share what your definition is, feel free to dig it. But I'm actually going to pull just from Merriam-Webster dictionary, and then I'm going to state my own version of that. So I have here that consent is the permission for something to happen or agreement to do something. For me, that translates to consent is a full body fuck yes, where your mind, your heart, and your body is connected and on the same page. To that point, consent is not any disconnect between those 3 things, and you are not agreeing. And you do not have to say no in order for that consent to be real. Okay? So B, do you have a definition, a working definition, one that you've developed over the years, or one that you tend to refer to just in general? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, and I do just want to state this, oftentimes when we talk about consent, more often than not, people are going to like the sexual arena. Consent is something that exists in all arenas of life in relationships. So B, do you have a specific definition that you want to share, or
I like yours?
Yeah.
Nope,
Okay.
I like yours.
Okay. So why are we talking about this? Well, I was on a coaching call with a client, and this was probably 6 months ago now, and she was recounting a story. She's a conscious single. She was in the dating arena at the time, and she was talking to this guy, and for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months, and she was interested in dating him. So they started going on dates and yada yada. I think it was like two or three dates before they really started to kind of like take things to quote unquote that next level, which for her and for him, that was not just being out in public spaces, that was actually bringing it quote unquote home. And this date was set up so that he would be coming over to her apartment. And I believe that they had ordered food and whatnot. And long story short, what ended up actually happening was very different than what my client had initially consented to. And I want to get into some of those high level. And I want to use this as a story to showcase how there were little moments where consent was pulled back. And the big thing about consent is when you have the ability to pull back on whatever your yes was at all times, at any time. This is not just in the sexual arena. When you say yes initially to something, that doesn't mean that that yes has to stick out there. But if you're anything like my client, if you're anything like people in what we hear and see every single day, we don't know enough about consent, the different types of it, what consent is not, to not utilize it and to not recognize what's actually going on. So essentially, she consented to having him come over her apartment, right? Like, would love to have, some food. Let's order some food and let's hang out, right? Like, let's hang out, right? Like, and hanging out at that time, I can imagine there's many different forms of hanging out when you're in that quote unquote dating phase, right? Some people might have assumptions of what would happen that night. From her, she was consenting to having him come over to her safe space, eating food with him, and sharing quality time with him. What she was not consenting to when the plans originally happened was what it ended up leading to was him forcing himself on top of her on the couch that they were hanging out on, running his hands up her shirt and trying to go down into her pants. And
Whoa.
what ended up happening was her kicking him out. And so, yes, whoa. So she did not consent to that happening. And after we processed it, this is honestly not unfortunately, it's not a story that's uncommon. So I want to talk about for a second what consent is not. Consent is not assumed. When you are in a relationship or going on a date, or when you're engaging in a non-intimate relationship, you cannot just assume that someone is okay with it, doing something, being something, agreeing to something. Consent is not assumed. Just because they didn't say anything does not mean that that's consent, right? Her not saying, please don't go down my pants, or please don't go up my shirt, please don't touch me, like, please get off of me. Her silence is not consent, right? The absence of a no is not a yes. Body language usually says it. And in that moment, she said, Emilia, I freezed. I started to go into a panic and a shutdown and then insert all that. So she froze. He received that as a yes because she was silent. And so he thought that she was consenting to that behavior happening. So when she actually came back into her body and said, I need you to get out right now, like, I need you to leave, and he honored that, what actually happened was her realizing, oh my God, I have dissociated from this moment. I initially consented to a innocent date. And because I sat next to him on a couch and I didn't say specifically, do not put your hands here and do not touch me in this way, that means in his name, or in his mind, that she said, yes, I want this and I'm agreeing to do this. Consent is not any sort of pressure, right? If they're afraid to say no, or if someone has any chance of fear of saying no, and or if you have to convince someone or tease someone or tickle them into a giggly fit of touching or whatever, that's pressure. And if there's any power play where when we reprocess that, she's like, I thought I was in the power position because I was having him come over to my spot, my space. And so I felt like that was going to be safer for me. What I realized is I gave away my power by not knowing that I wasn't physically able to push him out of my apartment if I had wanted to, because he was bigger than me. And I felt pressured to just kind of go along with it. That's not consent. When you feel any sort of pressure. And then fourth, what's not consent is when you're incapacitated. A lot of people, this didn't happen to my client, but a lot of people, when you're under any sort of substance, you cannot get consent from someone when they are incapacitated. So that includes sleep, when they're unconscious, when they're incapacitated as a result of substance. Now, looking back, I'm sure we all have an experience of when we actually had someone else think that we consented to behaviors or engagements when we were asleep, unconscious, or incapacitated. Studies show that there is way more assaults actually happening when you're incapacitated. And as a result of the shame, it's not talked about. So going back to this client, right? We can all imagine that based on what was initially consented to, because she retracted that I'm not interested in still spending time with you, you need to get out, what kind of situation that was. When we talk about consent, there's 4 C's too, right? It needs to be clear. You have to have an enthusiastic yes, and that yes means yes. And if it's not a yes, or like I said, not a fuck yes, it's a no. So if you're on the other end and you're asking or you're interested in getting an agreement from someone or wanting to do something with someone, and again, this isn't just in the intimate arena, right? This is work, this is family, this is all relationships. If there's not a clear, enthusiastic yes, it's a no. And I think we really need, as a society, to get better at understanding that, picking up on body language, reading people better, and not just what we want to see. Continuous. This is the second C of consent. There needs to be continuous check-in. Yes now does not mean a yes later, and certainly not yes in the most convenient time for you. You need to check in, and that sounds like, is this still okay with you? Or how does this actually feel to you? Instead of just a yes, no question, how does this feel to you? 0 to 10, how safe does this moment feel for you right now? 0 to 10, how much do you agree with your former decision to do this, right? The next C, coercion free. You need to respect boundaries. Do not try to pressure, coerce, or leverage your power on someone else, especially when they don't want to. This is something that I want to be mindful of speaking to parents, because a lot of parents unconsciously coerce their children into consenting to things that they don't want to do. And that's when most people disconnect from their bodies at a really young age. Mom coerced me into hugging grandma, and I really wasn't comfortable with grandma. Dad said it was okay for me to go over and play with these neighbors when I really didn't want to. He coerced me that it was going to be, we were going to have ice cream over there. And honestly, those neighborhood kids, like they didn't do nice things to me. So we split from our bodies because we were coerced into giving consent. And whenever there's someone that has more of a power dynamic on someone else, that coercion is so insidious. And obviously, the last C is consciousness. If you're not conscious, awake, responsive, not under any sort of influence, fully aware of what is happening and capable of giving consent and understanding both the long-term and the short-term implications of their decision, that's not conscious. If they're not there, that's not conscious. So, B, let's talk about this. I'll break down the 4 different types of consent in just a second, but I think this is a really powerful topic that very few people actually consider when it comes to their intimate relationships and to their relationships as a whole and as they go about living in life. And you and I just went into a dialogue about how last episode, how relationships are pretty much where our brain defaults in between our life. And so unconsciously, we're always trying to optimize for belonging. So that begs the question, how often do you think that we are unconsciously consenting to things that aren't actually going to serve us, that we actually want to retract? And how much are we actually really giving our power away?
I can imagine a lot of people are going to get very frustrated by this dialogue because they're going to say, I can't mind read somebody. If someone tells me yes, I can't mind read them and know that they actually mean no and that they don't actually mean it. Or what, every time I want to make one step forward, I have to ask if it's okay. Or, well, a lot of women like playing the cat and mouse game and they'll say no, but a lot of the times they do actually mean yes. So I'm confused and I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Or a lot of men might be listening to this thinking, oh, they're just villainizing all of us and they're just trying to point the blame at all of us. That's not what we're doing at all, because women and men both do this. But to those other points that I made, what would you say to that? Because I know a lot of people are going to hear this and those are going to be their thoughts. I shouldn't have to mind read. I can't mind read. People like the chase and the cat and mouse game, so how am I supposed to know? And all other narratives kind of under that. Or like, am I going to have to ask every time I take a step forward?
Yeah. Understandable why someone might be frustrated by that, because it might feel like you're fighting someone else's fight, right? If you feel as though you have to check in and get consent at every quote unquote movement, right? That might feel burdensome and frustrating and unfair to you, right? And in all fairness, like I get that, right? Like I remember entering into a relationship with Alan, and as a result of my trauma and my experiences, consent became extra important at every single step, every single turn. And that probably was a big burden on him, because it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with my past partners and how non consensual a lot of things actually were in hindsight. Right. And so I get it. I get how that can be really frustrating and not feel fair or just. However, what I would say, and I'm sure Alan would attest to this, you're better off taking a proactive approach in this than feeling like this is burdensome, not doing it, and then down the line having the lack of consent that you are seeking in a relationship and seeking to hear from your partner bite you in the ass, because that's what ends up happening. If you're not consistently checking in, and really it comes down to a communication and a safety um, skill when it comes to
Mm.
safety in relationship. And so maybe reframe that and think about, would you rather have more safety and better communication in your relationship, or not? And more often than not, you would probably nod your head and you'd be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, safety and communication is really important in relationships. And I would rather have that be the foundation and the bedrock of whatever relationship I'm trying to build with this person, because that is a long-term strategy, right? That's a long-term game. Now,
Yeah.
if you're not playing the long game, you're going to easily villainize this conversation. You're going to easily be upset because you probably are just trying to get a quick fix. You're trying to get a quick outcome at the expense of someone else. And so it might also offer a mirror, right, that a lot of people haven't been taught, or it might illuminate a deficiency in your skill set that you've never worked on. I know, even from a leader standpoint, right? I know what that feels like when it's like, wait a second, like a team member has agreed to do this. Okay, now I have to double check that like they're okay to do this little extra step. Like that feels like an extra thing that I have to do. Okay, well, how can I as a leader be more effective in my conversations with my team or with my partner to make sure that there's never regret, or there's never a feeling like I disrespected or disregarded someone's individual autonomy and right to say no, because that would go against my level of integrity of ever putting anyone in that situation. And so that's challenged me even as a leader and as a partner. And I get that. It is extra work, and it's well worth it, because I sure as hell don't want to be the person on the other end where someone doesn't feel safe around me, be it my partner, be it my team, be it anyone else that I care about. And for sure as hell do not want to have breakdowns and ruptures in relationships that I do care about that could have been addressed upstream as a result of this. What would you say,
100%.
B?
No, I completely agree with you. I had a conversation with a client literally this morning where we were talking about this. She has had a very, very abusive relationship with her mother,
Mm-hmm.
and her mother moved in with her, and her mother finally left, and it's been a really toxic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And her partner that she met a few months ago, that they started dating and whatever, she's finally starting to see that she has cognitively consented to many, many things in the relationship that she viscerally, physiologically has been saying no to, but she's gotten so good at overriding what her body is telling her and agreeing to things because she didn't actually feel safe. And there have been multiple times where she's told this partner, I don't want this. We're going too fast. I don't like this, blah, 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 blah. And he's convinced her into it. And now he basically moved in with her without even asking her right after the mother moved out. And we had a conversation this morning, and I was like, do you actually want this? I know there's going to be a part of you that's going to try to override whatever comes up for you. But if you give yourself a second and you really think about it, does this actually feel right for you? And she took a minute and she goes, no, honestly, I don't want him here. Like, he's been trying to convince me to go faster this entire relationship, and I don't feel safe. I was like, that's not consent. You said yes, but you didn't mean it. And you said yes because you felt pressured to.
Right.
And again, we're not here to villainize men. We're not saying only men do this. Women do this shit too. Everybody, like
Everyone
every gender does this. It's not just men, but just those are the two examples that we had. I have other examples too where that's happened. You cannot in a therapeutic setting as a therapist, I am not allowed to see a client if they are under the influences of any substances. Even if it's marijuana, even if it's whatever, even if they only had one beer, I am not legally allowed to see that client because technically they have substances in their system, and given that, they are not able to consent. You cannot give consent if there's any substances in your body. Imagine if we took our life approach that way, where we deeply try to understand other people. To the episode where we talked about the loneliness epidemic, do you know how much that would help people not feel lonely? If we all actually got deeply attuned to one another and understood each other's body languages and understood what each other were thinking and feeling, because we developed the emotional and the social intelligence to actually understand those things, which is exactly what we're preaching here on this show. Or not preaching, I don't like that word, but that's what we are trying to educate people on and advocate for on this show. And those are the women that Emilia and I are sincerely trying to be and are putting effort into being in this world. We will feel less lonely and less isolated and have deeper, more meaningful relationships if we can understand all of these things and actually really be there with and for each other, because we full body have consented to it, because it actually feels right. Not through pressure, not through coercion, not through the other person being incapacitated and, well, they didn't say no. It's like, yeah, well, they didn't say yes either, you dipshit. Like, for anything.
Yeah.
If you're not fully aware of the circumstances either, you cannot say yes. It's like being sold a shitty car. Do you want this? I don't know all the information on it. So do I actually want it? But that's legal. I can sell you a lemon and nothing happens. It's like, well, that's fucked up. But it's true.
Facts.
I was sold a car with a busted radio, and their excuse was, well, we didn't have to tell you. Really, buddy? All right, my guy. That's not consent either. But anyways, I digress. If we... I'm pissed about that freaking car thing, man.
Yeah. Hey.
If you want a really good, healthy, loving relationship, you have to, if you want any sort of good professional relationship, any sort of friendship, whatever, you have to understand consent. And I learned a lot from you in this episode, so I sincerely appreciate it. And I appreciate you being open and willing to have these conversations, because so many people need to hear this and nobody else talks
1,000%.
about it.
No. And as a matter of fact, one thing I appreciate so much, that acknowledgement, and I'm happy to share, like, this is something that has caused so much pain in my life, and I want to share as much as I know, and I'll continue to do that and fight the good fight of educating and advocating for us becoming more aware of what consent looks, sounds like, and feels like, and how to give that and how to retract that, because that's so important from a sense of self-agency and autonomy and advocacy. And I think that without a keen skill developed in this, it is impossible to have mutually healthy relationships. I deeply believe that in my bones, such that if someone, like, for example, if Alan doesn't even have a great sleep, I equivocate that to being practically drunk. And so, like, I know he can't fully give consent if he's at like a 65 sleep score. Same thing with other people. That's why I have my clients, like, one of the whys, I make sure that I understand my clients' bio data. Like, if I don't understand your sleep score, where you're at with your sleep, like, that's biochemically impacted your brain to give consent and to be conscious, not incapacitated. So, there was an experience that I had a couple of weeks ago with a client where we realized as a result of a micro breakdown of a system in the back end of our aspect of Evolve, where an email didn't go out that explicitly makes sure that a client is consenting to X, right? A specific payment plan. And that just rolled over. And we realized, thanks to the help of that client, that like, whoa, there wasn't an explicit consent on that by pressing that button. And at Evolve, right? We like, no one would kind of hold the gun to our head and say like, oh, well, you did something wrong. It's like, no, I had a full blown conversation. That person was totally conscious. But because we didn't get and we didn't do our job on our back end and there was a breakdown of that system, it is so important that we show up within our values at Evolve to make sure that we do everything to take 100% ownership of where those things break down, where there wasn't the ability to quote unquote give consent, even though there was in many other aspects, but we take ownership of that and then we make it right because that's who we are and that's what we do. And so, you know, the 4 different types, I just want to make sure that we name those and give one micro example before we jump, right? Number 1 is a general consent. So this is kind of big, broad agreement. For example, when you get into a relationship with someone, this is given without specific details about a specific action or event, right? What it means to be in a relationship. Just because I'm your boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't mean that I agree to what you have in your head about what that means. Express consent, on the other hand, this is clear, explicit agreement given both verbally and in writing, or in writing, actually. It's directly indicating willingness to participate in a very specific action or activity. This might be very extreme, but if you've ever watched 50 Shades of Grey, there's a great example of express consent, where there's an actual agreement around the bounds of what Christian Grey and Anna were agreeing to. And a lot of people would be like, that's kind of messed up, but like that is express consent and written consent. And outside of the sexual context and intimate relationships, this is why employee-employer contracts are so important. This is why in family systems, there's a lot of shit that happens because there's no express consent. There's very few verbal, explicit, yes, I want to do that, or clear action stating. Just because nod, like hello, when you meet grandma or grandpa or uncle or whatever, just because you nod does not necessarily mean express consent. Like, yes, I want a hug. Yes, I want you to touch my ass. Like all that stuff. There's a lot of that express consent being assumed, but not actually being given. Number 4 is the implied consent. This is when you infer based on someone's actions or surrounding context circumstances that they agree to something. So a great example of this is like if you're at a blood drive and you have someone sit down in the chair that, let's say, is in that blood drive area and they start rolling up their sleeves. Someone comes over there and starts poking them with a needle. That's implied consent. You think that they're consenting to giving blood, but maybe they hadn't filled out the form or the waiver yet. And so you're just sticking them with a needle. That's technically implied consent. You might not have checked that they have their form explicitly written and agreed to. You just might think, oh, chair, person here, we're at a blood drive. They rolled up their sleeves. I didn't take into effect that it's actually really hot here and they were rolling up their sleeves because they're hot. So if I stick them with a needle, that's an issue, right? That's implied consent. It's not considered valid consent though, right? And then the last one is obviously informed consent. When you are informing a clear understanding of whatever proposed action in a relationship, the confines of a relationship, this is where you also are expressing explicitly whatever potential risks, benefits, alternative options you have before agreeing to proceed. This is something that we apply all the time at Evolve, and we make sure that there's informed consent, always fully comprehending. We even have a policy now that where we sit down and make sure that the client is understanding what this work really does involve. And that's really important because we want to make sure that not only are you agreeing to this growth journey, but you're understanding some of the implications. Like I'll straight up say like, hey, like this is really hard. You're going to experience some pain and some discomfort, and psychologically that might be really difficult. Right. And I want us to understand and have a mutual understanding of there's going to be times where that really sucks. Right. That's informed consent. That's so important in the confines of relationships. And more often than not, we don't have all 4 of those
types of consents locked in. And so we're operating in this world so unconsciously, and we're not checking in and developing our consent communication skills. And it is wreaking havoc on our relationships. So I know this one was a little thick in terms of content and whatnot, but there's a lot of good little rabbit holes that you could climb into if you do the research around consent. And I highly encourage that, not just in the sexual relationship, as that's freaking so important. I believe it was Belgium that just said, if it's not a yes, it's a sexual assault, something like that. I saw a headline, which is huge in terms of consent. And anyways, long story short, this is so important for all of us as we enter into relationships, as we continue conscious relationships, as we all grow and evolve, to really understand our power and where we might be unconsciously giving that away, or where unconsciously people might be power grabbing and trying to coerce or manipulate or dominate you, and being mindful of where your boundaries lie in this and what type of consent you have and have not given. Like, that's so, so important. So thank you for letting me kind of pop off on consent. Whew, there's so much more underneath this. And I'll try to include some really important digital assets that I use in some of my coaching calls with clients to help them really understand what it sounds like in real time too, because I know we only had so much time for this episode. So B.
That was fire. What is our little surprise now that you are at the end of this, what can we give to our listeners?
Okay, so we have a special surprise, like we said, to all of our listeners. As a thank you for being an Evolve community member, an Evolve listener, we have a 10% off discount code or promo code for Evolve Ventures Group Coaching, which is launching July 24th. This is our kickoff session, and there's only 10 seats total to this entire program. And if you're someone that is interested, that likes these conversations, that's on the growth journey, and that wants to get around 9 other members who are here to grow, to evolve, to get better at all these things that we talk about on this podcast, you're in luck, because this 10% will give you a total 10% off this freaking program, which is insanely affordable, extremely high in value. And trust me, you are not going to regret it. So full money back guarantee. I think it breaks down if you were to take a 3-month payment plan just alone without even a 10% discount. I think it breaks down to something like $97 per month. And we also have 6-month payment plans. So it's insanely affordable, insanely valuable. Do not sit out on this chance. And when you do on board, in that link, there will be a little spot where you can put on Evolve Listener. That'll get your 10% off the total program. So don't sit, just jump.
There's only 3 days until this program launches. Right now, today is the 21st. We are launching the 24th, which means a lot of the spots have already been taken. So if you don't jump right now, you are going to miss out, and you're going to have to wait until next year to do this program again. And a lot of people sign up for one and then they sign up for the next one right back to back. So we don't want you to miss it. There's still a couple spots open, so make sure that you sign up today. And we sincerely cannot wait to see you there. What is your episode suggestion?
My episode suggestion, if you like this topic, was 378, the difference in boundaries you need to know, as obviously that is critical. B?
Very nice. Mine is 407, the fear of finally using your voice. A lot of us struggle to give consent because we are afraid of being heard. We are afraid of using our voices. We don't want to be the asshole or the bitch, for lack of a better phrase. And we don't speak up for ourselves. So go listen to that one. All right, everybody. We cannot wait to see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.